I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money there.
Is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
Outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of but ultimately the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like, you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, they're like 25 years old, telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
and it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill, like, was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly, like, some really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So okay. FTX was this crypto exchange.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming
and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't gonna fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, "Oh, you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong."
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild too. The whole scene was wild.
Might be one of the first, like, trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or
views about what? Like, you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies, and to expose, but, like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about this. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. Washington, and I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like, I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But, like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like, he would be LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through who's, there were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So, like, the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. And that video has aged so well because it's like, people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He was
why the celebrities are important, and that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part, yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, he's like, well, like, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out.
Party.
That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. So before, it's like, if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all senator's office reached out to me, and they're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all. I mean, he was really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane, but dark where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually, you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. Just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to I want to say something. But why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video so they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Middleman, because there's no one who controls Bitcoin. No one can say no to a transaction. Now it's there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then you locate it out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your.
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
Literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, he launches Alameda Research first, which is just this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas, we're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to go start trading with it, unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. Very strange. And these offshore entities were also using U.S. branches. There's FTX US, which was more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's right. People in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. This doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. Actually, campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with NRs, and I'd go because it was my friends said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys.
One guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who pushed over the House. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. It never was hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was always there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't find out there were just no adults in that room, and the few adults that there were they had a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy Dan Free 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that there's nothing here, but the problem is that they're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like what he said in one of the interviews. He goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark, because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy, we'll restructure the company, we'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new, ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent, get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, he was the most notorious and well-respected. We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went? Analogy for losing your house?
It's funny. Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, let's say, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, it's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's okay, to that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets, so you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. There's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
Most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, information about that. He says, hey, we're actually all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this fancy language for a way to anonymize your transaction. You put it, nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I mean, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this backdoor, appreciate your transparency, kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. It was very opaque. Put one, let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. It's almost like a bank. You deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. When you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to this random external address because you send it to a different one.
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already. I mean, even leading up, CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but already, a day before. So this is funny. they found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this
Inevitable.
It's inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So that teased for a while. But I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers. And I wanted somebody to say back that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're trying to retool it. It wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Wow.
All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington, but FTX was sort of the worst offender. Let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. At the end, when you're ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX, so he decides to donate dark to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his
regulators when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations. How could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? What could they have possibly done to make it easy?
So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was just me discovering well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer Ethereum. What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
so he called it Fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this: if it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. Around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in, so you kind of think you're swimming safely with other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. It's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. You pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. Cam wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have right, it's all at some address. And so people were asking, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want to fall for something, doesn't mean you're safe. You have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, scammy phrase. It's actually such a phrase that, it's almost used everything. I don't have access to the book. I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda.
It's bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while, you're it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat. It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. I'll have to my feeling is offshore entities should not be they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore I don't know. It's very, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been.
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was. I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud, where when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. Enabled the account fiat at FTX, and so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured.
Whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
Really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called give you this yield. He starts to explain like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stops short. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they
and sell off all his tokens? Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this inevitable?
I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos.
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one, because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, I have assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
That you believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like
crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. Very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer. I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of, of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any.
How does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time? Or is it
you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. But the problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back, is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral, fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do that. If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China, like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here, maybe that's a big deal.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no
Binance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box.
Gotten away with it?
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like that's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal on sticks or something. Like, it was never – the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like when this stuff went down. And a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of to their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your – really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of, basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became NFTs left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So, like, look at the Turkish lira. I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z? What is that?
No, I'm sorry. I'm blanking on, it's this famous, I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous, after the fact, he's like, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
What they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, you know, there was fungibility between wallets. Calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud, or, you know, something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, we're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give a person in the space, to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, you know, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. But everybody, I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, he's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he knew Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers, is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. Regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations,